Hi, let's talk for a few minutes about tippet rings and why you should use them in most of your fly fishing situations. Based on the videos I've watched on YouTube, I'm going to guess that you have not heard this reason before. So maybe it'll be new to you. But even if you are using tippet rings, there's maybe a little detail that you haven't thought of before. So let's talk about the best reason, I think, why you should use a tippet ring. Now, first of all, the reason that we're usually given is that it helps to save your leader. You take the end of your leader, you run it through the first tippet ring in line, the one that's closest to the opening there on your little clip, and you tie your favorite knot. For most of us, it's probably a clinch knot or a uni knot. I'm just tying a different knot here just to be quick about it. But you tie that knot, make sure it's good and secure. Then you open up your clip, pull off that one knot. I didn't open up the clip well. You open up your clip and close it before you have a chance to drop it in the river. And you've got your clip off the tag end, and you've got the end of your leader. Then you take some tippet and tie it onto there, and then the end of the tippet you tie in your fly. And the point is that as you throughout the day, here's a big ugly version of it. Here's our leader. And I've tied a couple of uni knots here to tie our leader to our tippet. And here's our fly at the end of the tippet here. So we've got all that. Usually the explanation is that as you change flies and lose flies and you clip off and tie a new one on, and you clip off and tie a new one on, then when you get to if this were a tippet ring here, you get to the tippet ring and you just clip off the few inches of your tippet and retie a new piece of tippet onto your tippet ring, and you haven't had to, like in this case, you haven't had to cut this knot off and retie tippet to leader and eat up several inches of your leader. So that's the usual explanation for why you should use a tippet ring, to save your leader. Here's a different reason that I hope will be interesting to you. It's pretty well known, if you pay attention to knots and knot strength, that a knot that is tied to a hook, it can be pretty strong. A lot of them are 80, 90% break strength, maybe even 95% break strength of the line. Knots that are used to tie one piece of line to another are not nearly as strong. For instance, tied two uni knots here and slid them together. And generally speaking, whether you're using a uni knot or a surgeon's knot or a blood knot, those knots are roughly 50 to 60% break strength. And it's 50 or 60% of the weaker of the two lines. Whereas, say that two uni knots, roughly 50%, maybe 55% break strength of this tippet line. This uni knot here that's tied, not holding two lines together, but is tied to your fly, is more like 85% break strength. And so what that means is that if you have used pretty much any of the standard knots to connect your lines together, let's say this is a 15-pound test leader, and let's say this is a 10-pound test tippet material, mono, and if we've tied them together with, say, a blood knot or uni knots, this 15-pound, 10-pound, this 10-pound line here has been reduced to about 5-pound strength right here at the knot. So your knot is 5 pounds of strength, maybe 5.5 if it's 55%, but whatever that percentage is, 50, 60% roughly 5-pound break strength here, whereas the knot on your fly, you've got roughly 85% of that 10-pound break. So you've got about 8.5 pound break strength here, 5-pound break strength here. And that's pretty typical of any kind of knots that you look on YouTube and watch the Rio and the Toit analysis of knots, and there's a huge drop off in the break strength of terminal knots versus connecting knots. So what that means is when you use a knot here, you've got a much weaker break strength here than here. And generally speaking, you want your weakest point of all of your tackle, of your line, to be your terminal knot, your last knot, the knot that ties the fly to the tippet. That way, when you break off on a fish, you break off on a rock or whatever, the line's going to break here rather than here. That's what you want, is to break. So you lose the fly, but you don't lose all your tippet and have to retie new tippet and eat up some of your leader. You're going to be consistently breaking off here, not here, if you use a knot here. But if you'll replace this knot with a tippet ring, so you tie a tippet ring at the end of this with your best knot that you've got, you can use one of those, a clinch knot, a uni knot, but it's not a connecting knot. It's the same as if you were doing the knot here. It's in one of these 85% strength knots because you're tying it to a tippet ring, rather than the 50% knot because you're tying it to another piece of line. So you can put a tippet ring here, tie a clinch knot, a uni knot, or whatever knot that is that you prefer here, and have a strong hold, and then you can tie this end of the tippet to that tippet ring with another 85% strength knot instead of a 50% knot. And then you tie this knot with the fly onto the line with one of those 85% knots, and you've got a bunch of 85% break strengths instead of a 50% break strength. And so, here's the computer-generated graphics that, sorry about this, but let's say this is a 5-pound line, roughly 6X, and this is a 3.4 pound line. That's rough. Let's see, this is probably 5X and 6X. If you have a knot here, this is just what I've explained a minute ago. If you have a knot here that's a 50% knot, then it's going to be 50% of 3.4 pounds. It's going to be 1.7 pounds. Then you go ahead and tie your fly on here with one of these 85% knots, and that's a break point of 2.9 pounds. 85% of this, 50% of that, 1.7 pounds, 2.9. So there's the problem where the break strength here is higher than the break strength here. If you'll change that to a tippet ring, you can use one of your 85% knots here, one of your 85% knots here. That gives you a 4.25 break strength here, a 2.9 pound break strength here. Use one of these 85% knots here to have another 2.9 pounds, and now your weak part, your weakest knot is in here rather than right there. Now, one little detail, and even if you're using tippet rings, you might want to consider doing this, is let's change this knot from one of these 85% knots to maybe a 95 or 99% knot. If you would change this knot here to a Trilene or a Toit, those are in the 95% range, something like that, maybe even 99%. And now your break strength here becomes more like 3.2. If it was a 95% break strength, this would be a 3.2 pound break strength knot right there versus 2.9 here. So make sure this knot is especially strong. Trilene or Toit would be two good options. And that way, with a little bit of luck, your most frequent point of knot failure is not going to be up here someplace. It's going to be right there, as it should be.